This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so I think we have done the cluster setup last session, and even we have seen how to create the pods. And so we created pods using the commands, right? So kubectl run command, and we have created a pod, and then so I think even we have used the command kubectl expose command. So what is the purpose of this command? When we use kubectl expose, why we need this expose command? To the external. Okay, how is that possible? How we can expose a pod to outside world? How we can access a container pod from outside? Service. Yeah, using the service. Yeah, that's the answer anyway. So using service. So if you expose your pod and to a service, and what type of service we have used in kube expose? Kube proxy. What is that? Node. Node what? Node port. Okay. Service name was node port was a service name. So using which so we exposed our container to the outside world. Okay, that's one of the services. Yeah. So let's try it today. Now we're going to see how do you create pods using manifest. Okay, we're going to create manifest. Using this manifest, we'll see how do we create these pods. So what is a manifest? Which is a configuration file. Okay. So we can do everything through the manifest. We can create a pod and we can expose that even. So apart from the commands, so I want to expose my pod to the external world as a service through the manifest itself. So we can also do it. Okay. So we'll talk about that first. How do we create pods using manifest? So these manifests, you can call them manifest configuration files. You can call them scripts, whatever. So these are written in YAML script. Okay, written in YAML. Let's see how do we do that. And those who don't want to wear a mask, you can feel free to go outside. So there's a lab. Sit in the lab and then do practice if you don't wear a mask. Thank you. Well, so okay. So what are the components? We discussed the components, right? They are components. So what are the components of master? The node components? Controller on the nodes or on the master? Okay. Control manager or controller. Okay. Controller. Scheduler. Which one? API manager. Okay. etcd. So why we need etcd? Yeah, it stores the cluster information, the node IPs, and then how many pods are running, what containers are running. All this information is maintained by the etcd. Okay. So then what controller does, or what's the difference between controller versus scheduler? creates pods. Okay, so if you want to create some pods and if you want to create some containers on the nodes, scheduler is going to manage them. That means creates them. Okay. What is controller? Many. Okay, so it is keep communicating with your nodes, and then master communication and then node communication is maintained. Okay, so that is what is controller. Then what are the components we have on the nodes? Node components. Queue proxy. Okay, good. So next, other components. Why we need nodes? Firstly, pods. So we don't say continuous here because we are in Kubernetes terminology. Since we are in Kubernetes terminologies, we call them pods. Because the pods have your containers, that's different. Then kubectl. Kubectl is not a component. Kubectl is a CLI. Kubectl is CLI. It's not a component. Kubelet. Kubelet. But kubectl is a command line. So which is it's not a component, it's command line. Kubectl. Okay. So now what is difference between kubelet versus kubectl then? Okay, what is kubelet? What is kubelet? So it maintains the status of the container which is in a pod. Okay. For example, there is a pod. In that pod you have a container, and container is down. And then if the container is down, so kubelet is going to uh, kubelet is going to manage the uh, is going to manage the status of the container in a pod. Okay. So any other components? What is queue proxy? Yes. So queue proxy helps us to expose the content, expose your pod to a service. Okay. So we have used a node port service. Well, we have done the cluster setup. Going with now, let's see. So if you want, you can turn on the AC. Yeah, there is a remote. Anyone did the cluster setup? No. So going back to, okay, let's create one. Let's create a container. Let me take this first. We'll go with the other example. But before that, let's log into our master. So there is that Kubernetes cluster. Yes. Just a minute. Let me remove these ones. Where should we go? So let's make some directory here. Let's say something like Kubernetes scripts. So I'm going to create my first pod, let's say first pod, and then dot yeah. So whenever you create your pod using manifest, so we start with first. So mention the API version. So and then also you mention the kind, what kind of you're creating. So when you talk about kind, so we different kinds. So we can create kind. We can create a pod. Okay. So since we are creating a pod, I'm going to mention in my manifest saying that so kind is pod. I'm going to mention kind is pod. Okay. Mention that I'm creating kind is pod, and then mention the API version. So initially API version. So what API version we are using? So V1 version. So with this information, so you're going to start your configuration file. And what is we mentioned here? We mentioned so image name, and so what is the pod you are creating, your pod name, and then we also mentioned some labels. So what is the label? We'll talk about it. But label in the sense, label is for grouping. For example, I'm creating, let's say a service. I'm creating a pod first. For that pod, I'm creating a service. So I will be creating services, pods, everything in within a group, so that the pods and services will be communicating. So we create them within a label. Right. So we'll talk about that, but initially, so let me just do one thing. So I think I better just take the step. So this is my step. So we start with for API version and then kind is pod and then metadata. So metadata has, so this is my name and then label. So what is the name? Name is the pod we are creating. I'm creating my pod, so that's a name. So go with pod and then that's my name of the pod. Let's give some name. Let's say the name is first pod. So I'm going to upload the document. We can even do some hands-on with the document, the scripts document, this document. Okay. So first pod and then label. So label is for, you can give any name to the label, but as of now, I'm going with my label name as app label, which is hello world. So what is the purpose of label? I'm creating multiple pods. So it is also possible to create a multiple pods for the same application, and also I'm creating multiple services. All of them I want to create within a group. So if you want to create within a group, you can go with the concept called label concept. So why that label then? So I have created service, I have created a pod. Then that pod will be having this service assigned. Like expose yesterday I have shown you. First I have created a pod, right? Last session. So once the pod is created, then I've exposed that pod to an external world using a service. You can do that if you have service and then pod running within a same label, same group. Otherwise, that's not possible. But if you ask me, so in the last session, so I have not mentioned any label for my pod or else service. So did we use any labels? So what is the command we have used in the last session to create a pod? So using kubectl command, kubectl run command, right? You remember the commands? So first I have created a pod using kubectl run command. Okay. After the pod was created, then I have used expose command. Okay. Then, but in here, this is just a command. I have mentioned nowhere, so the label name. So do you see any label name over here? No. Then how that pod is created or pod is attached with the service? So if you don't mention any label name, the label name will be default. There's a label called default label. So your pods and services will be created in the same label. The label name is called default is the label name. But I want to create them so in some different label. Then in that case, you mention the label name here. That's my label name. And then go with specifications. And in under specifications, metadata is regarding your pod information. Under specification tag, you mention your container information. What do you mean by container information? So what is the name of the container? You see the name of the container. So containers, name of the container I'm creating, plus the image you want to pull. What is the image name? Mention the image name. And then, so the port numbers. These are the port numbers for the container port number. This is not a node port number. This is a container port number. So whenever you create a container has a port number or not. So that is a container port number. So this has to do nothing with your node port. It's a different. So when you talk about ports, this is a very, very important question in Kubernetes. So there's a concept called ports concept. So there are a number of ports we have in Kubernetes. So, but as of now, we are looking into container port. What is a container port then? So this is the port number on which your container will be running within the pod. Okay, it's container port number. Apart from this, we have more. We have port, and then we have target port, and then so we have what else? We have node port, target port, and then node port. So we talk about them in the future, but as of now only so talk about container port number. So this is an very, very important question. So target port versus node port versus container port. Okay, good. Now this is my script, and then I'm going to change my. You can give different label names, whatever the label names you want to give. Let's say hello world first label something, and then so your container name, you can give container name. Let's say first container, and then image. You want to pull some image, just mention the image name over here. Yeah. So let's give image. You can take some tomcat. Then go with next. So where is my Docker hub? Take Docker hub. Let's go with tomcat. Right. So you can just use that image. What is the image name is? Tomcat is image name. I'm just going that image, tomcat image. So mention that here. So save it. So what's next? So we have a manifest ready. We have configuration file ready. Let's run the manifest. How do you run the manifest? Using kubectl, then apply, and then -ef, your manifest file name. Okay. So this is going to create a pod, or this is going to run your manifest file, and then it is going to create pod. Now enter. So the pod name is, what is the pod name is? First pod. Okay. So how do you list the pods? I want to see the list of pods. Just like in Docker, we have Docker PS for listing containers, and here it is. So Q CTL, and then get pods. So what is the pod name is? First pod. That's my pod name. Okay. So we have other pods. Don't worry about these pods. So these are the pods I used already. Then look at that pod name is, that is my first pod. Okay. So going with, I want to see, so what exactly was happening when I run my manifest. I run my manifest, right? So when I run my manifest, something has happened in the background. What has happened? Or else I use a command called kubectl, and then describe. This command is used to describe your pod, describe pod, and then pod name. What was the pod name? The pod name was first pod. That's a pod name. So I will describe my pod. So when I describe the pod, you can see the full status of your pod. So that means first, what is the first thing? So about 75 seconds ago, successfully assigned. And then, so assigned to, what is that? 172, 31, 24, and 2480. So what is that? So let me just go with that. Where is my, what is that? Node IP. So the pod is running on that node, and that is a node IP address. And then you can see the start time, and then label. What is the label name? That's my label name. Status is running status, and then you have containers. That's your container ID. Okay, and that's image. And going with, scroll down, then you can see. So you can see that first it is pulling the image. Successful image was pulled, and then created container, and then your, so event pod is created. Well, I want to see my node actually. Is my pod is running on the node? Let's go with the node. So go with instance. So try that docker ps command. What is the pod we have created? So first container. So that's my pod. You see that pod, and the pod name was first container. So this is your that is your container created on that pod. That's your container. Okay, that's my container, and that's a container IP address. So same IP address of the container ID. I'm sorry, the container ID 5882. So that's my container. It's 5882. Now, so what if I stop my container then? Docker stop. We need the container ID, right? So take the container ID. I want to stop the container. Now container is stopped. So will it be creating a new container then? What is the purpose of a pod? To run the containers. Simply, it makes sure that your container is with your container running with high availability concepts. Okay. Well, so go with the Docker PS. Enter. So is it created a new container in the pod? It has to be created in the same pod, not in other pods. So which one it is? That's your first container, right? What is the pod name was? So first container was first app something. Okay. So that is created in the same pod. Yeah, you see that first pod. Then created in the same one, and this is a container ID. Can I see the same ID reflecting on my master? So what was the previous container ID? That's the previous container ID. If I again go with my describe pod, so in that pod, will I be able to see the old pod or new pod? New pod. Okay. So again describe kubectl describe pod, and then the pod name first pod. That's our new pod. It's updated container. I'm sorry. That's updated. Okay. Now the question is how your master knows that is a new pod is new container is added in the pod. Understand the question? So previously, so when I've created my pod, so master has created pod on the node. So at that time, master knows that this is a container, this is a pod, and it maintains the whole information. But after I stop the container in the pod, how my master knows the new container is created in the pod? Which one? Controller. Correct. So that's why we have controller. Right? The controller makes sure it manages the communication between the master and the nodes. Okay. And so now this is my node, right? How my node knows? Okay. So that means we are on the node. Then I have stopped the container. So it has created another container in the pod. How your pod knows the container is stopped? We have another component, keeps track of the statuses. What is that? Cube CTL. Cube CTL. So that is where your components come into the picture. Now, so I want to expose that to some service. Okay. So what service? Let's use the same service, which is node port service. So what is the command to expose? Docker expose pod, and then pod name, and then type of this service. Okay. So expose pod, and then what was the pod name? First pod, and then hyphen type, and type is equals to node port service. Something wrong? Any syntax error? Oh, right. Oh, sorry. It's not Docker, right? What is that? It is kubectl. Sorry, kubectl. Yeah. Sorry. Pod name changed. Pod name is not changed. The container is changed, not the pod. Okay. Well, so now this is exposed, and then you can see the service now. How do you get the list of services? So kubectl, and then get services. And what is the service name which is created? So just 16 seconds ago, that's your first pod. That's your node port service. Apart from node port, you can also create load balancers. We'll talk about that later. So that's another type of service. Okay. Now the difference between node port versus cluster IP. So that is another service. What is the service name is? Kubernetes, right? So what is the type of service is? Cluster IP. So when we use this cluster IP services, and who is using the cluster IP services? Kubernetes. Now, by looking at the name, can you tell me why we use when we use cluster IP services? That is another type of services, cluster IP. What is cluster IP service? For example, instead of node port, so what is the service I have used to expose? Service name was node port. The service name was type of the service was node port. So I want to expose that to a service called cluster IP. Okay. So if I expose to a cluster IP service, so what will be the difference between cluster IP versus node port? What will be the difference?
Like VPC within the.
Correct. So cluster IP is so for the purpose of only within that cluster. So for example, I have created a pod. Yesterday I created a pod, right? You remember last session? So some pod, some sample for example pod. So and expose that to a service called what service? Cluster node port service. And after I expose that to node port service, so what I have done, I was trying to access that pod from the outside with the help of node IP address and then node port number. Was I able to access from outside or not? What do you mean by outside? Outside of the cluster, right? So was I able to see some display page or not? At the end of the session, I've shown you that, right? So that is what you mean by node port. But if you enter that, so for example, let's say instead of node IP, and I've used cluster IP. So if I now after that, if I enter the IP address of the instance with port number, will I be able to access that pod? No, because that is only for cluster purpose only. But how do you expose the cluster IPs? We have some port number concept. That's why we have concepts called so these ports. Okay, we talk about that later. But anyway, so are we able to create the containers? Are we able to create the pods? And are we able to expose them as a services? Yes, we are. But so let's try for another type, another container, another pod. Okay. So, but for the next container or next pod I'm going to create, so which I will be so using different concepts like volumes. Okay, I will be attaching some volumes. You remember the volumes concepts? Okay, let's talk about the volumes. How we can so create a pod by attaching some volumes. Okay, so go with that concept now. So let's say give some take an example. Let's say something like second pod something. So, yeah. So try this example with different volumes. We attach some volumes. So API version and then kind metadata So let's give some name here. Name is, let's say, second pod. Okay, that's my pod name. And then specifications. Under specifications, we have containers and give container. So that's a container name. Use some container name. So Nginx container. And then image is Nginx. So what is Nginx? Nginx is just like your Tomcat. So we have Tomcat, and on Tomcat we can deploy the applications of var applications. The same way we can deploy the applications onto Nginx. That's your web server, right? And then image name is Nginx. You have image Nginx image on the Docker registry. And then so you can pull that Nginx. And does it have a latest tag? I think you should have a latest tag. Go with latest. Okay, the tag name is latest is the tag name, and there it is. Okay, so that's latest. Anyway, if you don't mention that name here, okay, so that will be so. When if you don't mention the image tag, how do you mention the image tag is column latest. But if I don't mention the name, it will be. So if you don't mention the tag name, by default it is latest. Okay, so now can we change the images after we launch the pod? For example, now what is my tag is latest. Okay, but then I'm going to create my pod. After pod is created, can we change the tag? There is a different tag, something like Perl. That is a tag name. Can we change the tag? Is it possible? We'll see that example. Right? First, and then your volumes. So here you have volumes, and volume name is just some volume name. Empty directory means it's an empty volume, empty directory which has no data in it. And then so whenever you go with some volume, empty directory volume, the volume should be mounted from here. What is mounting means? So this is like mapping. You remember the -p? What is -p stands for? Sorry, -b, volume mount, right? So you mention the host path first, then you mention the container path. That is what is mounting then. Okay, I'm mounting in, I'm mounting now, and then host network. This is your network strategy. What is network? Host network means what type of network we are using here? There are different networks, right? What are they in Docker? Host, bridge, none. Okay. So what is the default network? Which is the default network. So then, so try this and so, sorry. So kubectl and then apply icon here. Then one second one. Now it has created a pod again. But so going with now kubectl and then pods, get pods. I mean get pods. Okay. So which one it is? The second pod. Okay, that's in running status anyway. So what is one of one? What is this one of one? Containers. Number of containers in a pod. So there is number of containers in a pod. Means we can run multiple containers in a pod as well. Now, why do we run multiple containers in a pod? Think about application level. Okay, I have an application container, I have a database container, right? I want to run both of them in single container, single pod, I'm sorry. So that is also possible. Anyway, now go with, you want to go with describe again, kubectl describe and pod and the pod name. Okay, so there is your, so the strategy, you can see the strategy here, successfully assigned, and then so you can see that both information. Well, it's not required to check it every time on the node, that will be there anyway. So go with docker ps. That's our second pod. Okay, so you have, okay, let me just do one thing. So in the previous case, we have stopped the container, but what if I stop a pod then? Let me stop the pod. Okay, so take that. Stop means I can remove it anyway. So go with docker stop. Okay, so it's being stopped. Now docker ps. You have second pod created. So which is, what is the status is up status. Okay, so and then it will be creating also a container in a pod. Okay. But what if, let's say I have created my container using docker. Okay, I have stopped my container. Then is it going to create a new container? And is it a new container or different container, different pod? New one or different one? Is it a new one or the same? Is it like same one I have used? I have stopped it. It's a new one. So you see that that's a new different ID, container ID, and the same container. So docker, sorry, not docker. So kubectl, and then so describe pods, and the pod name, describe pod, and then second pod describe. Then so I successfully pulled image again. So what was the status? So it has been stopped, and again it is creating a new one. Okay, so that is the best advantage we have with Kubernetes containers. So everything, you have containers running, you have all pods running, everything is running as usual. But the difference is Kubernetes is deploying the containers, deploying the pods, and Kubernetes is making sure that the container statuses are so running always. Okay, then let's modify that manifest. I'm going to modify the manifest. So what kind of modification? Let's say I have a new tag of the image and I want to update my image. Okay, so what is the tag then? Let's take a tag. So we have a tag, something called, it's a tag which is, what is the tag name is Perl. Okay, go with that Perl. Perl. That's a tag name. Perl. Now I run that same with same information. What do you mean by same information? Same pod name. What is the pod name is? Same pod name, and then I'm not changing the pod name. So I have changed only my tag of the image. If I change it, so is it going to create a new pod with a different tag number, or is it going to update my existing pod or existing container? Okay, good. So kubectl and then apply -f. What is the status? Previously, what was the status? Created. Now it is configured. So without modifying the status of the pods, can we still update the image? Now go with that kubectl and then describe pod and the pod name. I want to see this status, okay? Describe pod and the pod status. So pulling image, okay? So it is pulling image container is, and then started created. Now tell me, so how about the status of the container? So is it stopped or not? Look at the statuses. What was the status? Started. So when it will be started? It will be started only if it was stopped. So that means the container status is changed or not? Yes, the container status is changed. I can say pod state, I mean whatever pod or container status, that is changed. You can see here. What is that? Filling.
How about the old image?
Old image? Images will be there as usual. Don't worry about the images. Images, you have it on the here. Docker images. You have the images. So what are the images? Latest one is you have the images, everything as usual. You have the images. Okay. Images are maintained, but the question was, so without disturbing my container status or pod status, can I update my container or pod? So here, as of now, it is not possible, but there is a way you can do it. Okay, there's a way, there's a different way. We'll talk about that probably in the future. So, but so what is that? What did you observe this? If you modify your container, if you modify your configuration file, and again you apply that, and then it is going to update the image in the pod, but it has to kill the existing one. Okay, that means stop it and then creates a new one. But without doing it, without changing the status, can we update the image in the pod? Yes. That is still possible. So these are the questions you can expect. These are comparison questions. This type of questions you can expect. Okay. And now, so what was the pod again? kubectl get pods. What was the name? Second pod, right? Okay. Let's expose that to a service. How to expose it? kubectl and then expose pod and then pod name. Then what? Hyphen type is equals to service name. Service numbers node port. So what was not possible to expose? Why? Pod has no labels. So you understand that now what is the importance of label now, right? So that is what I have explained. So if the pods and has some label and you want to expose that to a service, your pod label and then your node pod label and then service label must be matched. Okay, but Again, the same thing. When I was creating yesterday's first pod, so I was able to create a pod without a label. I was able to expose that to as well. But now today it's not possible. What is the reason? The pod I have created with the help of manifest. So in that manifest itself, sorry. So where is the manifest? So this manifest in metadata, you mention labels, and then label name. So give some label. If the label is given, then I can expose that as an service. Okay. But how do you do that? I'll take that example in tomorrow's session. So now, but anyway, you understand the importance of services now. So what is the importance of service and what is the importance of labels now? Is it clear, everyone? So or else you try that, okay? That is your task. Just try this. Just go with label, okay? And then app, then label name, hello, label. Okay. So after that, you go with kubectl, apply -f your manifest. What is that? So it's label. 1 second. It's validation error. Valid false. Okay. Just a second. So like label name, that should be okay. So that's a validation error. So it was already, pod was already created. So since pod was already created, after creating a pod, so then you cannot add a label to the pod. That's not possible. The reason is you already have a label. If you already have a label created, and to that label you can add the pods. But if you already have pods created, and to the pods you cannot create a label. That's not possible. That's validation error. Okay. So but still you can try that, give some try, and then that will be a failure. But if you want to make that validation fail, and if you don't want to Kubernetes to validate it, you can go with validate is equals to false, but that does not make any sense. The reason is I want to create some labels. If you go with the validate false, it won't be validating your script. Okay, I mean the error will be neglected. Yeah, but so but I want to create a service, and I want to create different types of services. I want to create load balancer service. Okay, and how you create a service? I want to create a node port service, but I will create them with the help of manifest. So we take that example in tomorrow's session. Okay. So we'll be creating, firstly, we'll try with some ports concept, port number mapping concept, and we'll understand importance of the ports. So if possible, we'll talk about this services concept. How do you create these services? How to expose these services, like load balancer services? And then, so we take the example. What example we're going to take? So do you remember in our Docker last session? So I have deployed I have created an Docker file. I've created my customized image. So in that I have deployed my sample war file, right? So that image, I want to run it through Kubernetes. So that I want my application to be running on Kubernetes clusters. Okay. So we do that in tomorrow's session. If possible, next session. We'll just see how it goes. Okay. So now every point in Kubernetes is very, very important. So just like Jenkins, every point is important, same as in Kubernetes. If you miss even one point, so then that might be affecting in our some other session. That's why I go through the cluster setup first. Once you have the cluster setup, then get that practice. I think, did I share the document? No? I think I've shared the document. It's already there, I guess. So, It's an handful, right? Anyone tried? At least you haven't even tried to set up the cluster. Rectify it by yourself. Yeah. Any questions from the session?